And we're back to this again. Welcome back once more to now part 2 of the Hefters art piece. Last week I covered some of the basics of the piece, the people involved and how it came to be. And picking up this week, you can see we are still on the line art. Pardon me. The line art is always the longest part of the piece for me, and as I assemble handsome Squidward here, thank God it improved after that, you can kind of see why. My work is very line art heavy. There are some people who, far better artists than me, who have been at this for far longer, who can visualize the shape of a person and block it out with shading and all that sort of thing. And while I have a couple of pieces in my repertoire that have been done entirely without shading in the long, or without line art in the long term, I always start off with solid line art and define most of the shapes of a character with that line art. With things like muscles, I will sometimes go through and remove lines after. Once the visualization process has happened and I'm happy with that and I've put the shading in, I'll remove the line art, and it'll make the shading look better. But that's fairly rare. Usually the lines I put in are there to stay once they're done. The process of drawing, it involves a lot of removing bits for me. I'll put in how things are going to look as if everything were visible, as if all overlapping parts didn't hide what's beneath, but then clear them away. Marribel here, she has a bag on her, a messenger bag, sorry, not saddlebag, with hands dipping into it, and she also eventually receives some very big floofy hair that I enjoyed very much drawing, and that involved like bits being cut out. I'm almost hesitant to remove pieces at the same time, because it means at that point the shapes I've gotten are the ones I like, all of it. And at least when I started, I would often perform this little process of making sure that I was doing things in separate layers to try and keep certain parts reusable, when in reality I was never going to go back to those. I was never going to reuse them. It was always going to be, that is the piece it's for. I wasn't ever going to double down on them. If I wanted to do that, I'd do 3D work, which I am also working on, but essentially, yeah, when I'm doing 2D art, the aim is a single piece, and if I'm going to use it elsewhere, it's going to be in that same piece. You notice a few of the head shapes get recycled here, at least to start with, before being tweaked. Any of the ones that loosely were in the same direction, I think in the end it only ended up being Seluri and Jaliah, who have identical shapes. Actually, no, that's wrong. Elith did as well. The others, their poses didn't fit otherwise. And of course, for the taller people and the Draconic people, they had their own unique facial designs that required their own work. Snouts have a very specific kind of cone of rectangles and triangles that you put in place before you work on the actual thing, and that's another staple of my work. These little dragons here were probably the weakest part of the whole design as well. I took a lot of attempts at them, and I redid their colouring twice before I got something that I was particularly happy about. And even then, it was less than I hoped. There had been a certain patchwork, flowing colour design I wanted to do with them that I ended up abandoning in favour of a more chimeric look of colours that are less fluidly drifting between sections and more just occupying certain areas, like on the legs, as you'll see when I get to them. And here we go, 20 minutes into these videos, and over 24 hours of work. I think at this point it was about 30, 32. We're getting onto the colouring more than just the large blocks of it. That gives you an idea of how big a difference there is. The colouring and the shading all together, they ultimately encompass only a third of the time spent, though the colouring is probably my favourite part in the end, because while the shading brings a lot of it to life, the colouring is where the characters finally, to me, start to feel real, realised. The line art puts them in place and gets a lot of the important stuff done, but there's always a subtle feeling of being off until the colours go in. So this is my most enjoyable part of the whole experience. It's also the quickest, incidentally, though I do choose to believe that that is unrelated to it all. There's a little bit of a trick to this. Once I've gotten a complete line art, I'll make sure that it's all one solid line around the edges, and then select all that, invert the selection, put a big block of color in, and from there I can lock that layer, make sure that it won't ever leave that layer. It's why I can just kind of be wishy-washy with my lines a bit until I start getting into the nitty-gritty details. Here as well, Tammie-Lynn, by far, I think, the favourite piece I had to work on for this. It'll be more obvious when I get her shading, and I also enjoyed her shading the most. But I don't know, I managed to make her appearance just pop. She started out as quite unconventionally interesting to me, but I kind of loved it at the end. Kind of loved the final realization of her as a character. Elith as well, as a being of flame, she had her own unique challenges. She couldn't be shaded, because there is nowhere on her that is dark. So I would, in the end, start using blues on her to, rather than shading, reflect areas of deeper heat, which I used to kind of emulate it without things not making sense for what she is. Monika was also a unique challenge. Getting the skin tone right required a lot of futzing around, as you can see already. And while I did get there, and while I did get something that I think suits her, that I think is a peachy colour, it was always a bit of a hash job, let's call it. Now this lot, they have an inauspicious start. They started as an attempt to see what I could essentially get away with, not in terms of what I could draw, but the characters existed before this piece. I wanted to see kind of what I could sort of pull off as a complex set of interactions between a fully fleshed out party who were incidentally incredibly thick. I've got to keep my brand, you know this by now. And as such, these are effectively NPCs, at least the 8 that comprise the Hefters, and they are more like, in my head, one character. They're not individually, to me, an entire thing. Though they can be developed and though they can stand on their own, I see them all as ultimately collective parts of a single kind of mind. They have their focused traits. Jaliah is energetic, quick to make friends, quick to enjoy things, and very easily in forgiving. Monika is similarly enthusiastic, but she will clamber over things. She likes to inspect things, learn about the world, and is just generally quite friendly. But she gets in your face and isn't entirely socially apt. Mara is the quiet, studious one. She's the one that knows all of the things, the one who puts together the plans and organizes things, but she is not the diplomat and the teacher. The diplomat is Seluri. She is the one who, when Mara finds a job, Seluri negotiates. She makes sure that the terms are acceptable for everyone and makes sure that the contractor in question isn't going to screw everyone over. It's a very real possibility. Tammie-Lynn is the thief. She obviously does the quiet work, often aided by Monika, who can take the form of quieter, more discreet individuals. And she is akin to Jaliah. She's easygoing and easily forgives, but she's more attempting to be suave. She considers herself the rackish, roguish type, and she is at least partly correct, but often kind of lacks the approachability as she is a little bit feral, let's call it. Elith is an airhead. She has lots of interesting ideas and jumps on the chance to experience something, but often kind of flounders and overextends, which is a good thing that she can be thrown around a bit and still get up just fine. Otherwise, she'd have been hurt a lot longer ago. The snake is a giant snake. There's nothing really to say there. And Setepenre is a dip into the histories. She brings a whole lot to the table with a much more sensuous nature than the rest of the party, and has a whole lot to teach, somewhere between seductress and mentor. I think I'm glad I caught it all, at least in some way, how they're feeling and their posture and mannerisms. But once more, we are coming to the end of things. And the stories of the others, the non-hefters, they are not my story to tell. So I'll leave those out to be the realms of the people who created those characters in the first place. And I will leave my closing here so that you can enjoy the artwork in your own time. So once more, thanks for watching my strange little projects. Until spring rises once more on another wonderful day.